Cats Can't Talk. A story written by the librarian chick. A link to the original Reddit post will be available in the description down below. My daughter was complaining about a cat that stared at her while she was sleeping. "Sweetheart, we don't have a cat. We can't have cats because I'm allergic to them." I laughed at her imagination. Her cute little face scrunched up in frustration. "But there was a cat in my room last night. It's big and black, and it sits and stares at me." Her brother, my son Justin, rolled his eyes at his younger sister as he ate his Cheerios. "You just had a nightmare, Susanna. Everyone gets them. They're nothing special." He shot his sister another irritated look as he went back to eating his breakfast. "But there is one. I touched it, and it had really soft fur, and it spoke to me." She stared at her brother, as if trying to make him believe her with sheer determination. I smiled at my daughter and touched her hair, smoothing it back from her face as she spoke. "Sweetheart, your brother is right. You just had a nightmare, or a dream. It doesn't sound like you were really scared of it." I stepped away from her and went to make some coffee. It really was too early to be up, but the kids had to be ready for their bus. "I wasn't really scared, but it was really weird, and it spoke to me." She looked from me to her brother and back again. She had a pleading look in her eye. "What did the cat say?" Justin asked, as he pushed his empty cereal bowl away. "It just said my name. That's all." She looked defeated. It was clear to her now that neither of us believed her. "If there was a talking cat, then it proves that it wasn't real," Justin said with a shrug. And he was right after all. Cats certainly didn't talk. Sometimes people have dreams where they can fly or breathe underwater. But that doesn't mean that they really can, I tried to rationalize. It wasn't the best explanation, but at the age of 8, she really should know the difference between dreams and reality. "I guess," Susanna said in a dejected voice. She ate the rest of her Fruit Loops, so she couldn't have been that upset. If she was really upset, she would refuse to eat, which drove me crazy. Kissing the kids goodbye, I ushered them out the door and to the street corner where a small group of children had already gathered. "I love you guys," I waved and smiled at them as I stepped away, starting to head back to the house. When Susanna took hold of my hand, thinking she might want a hug, I bent down and opened my arms to her. She ran into my arms, and I gave her a big hug. "There really was a cat, Mommy." She said it softly before backing away and joining the other children. I hesitated for a second before finally heading home. Susanna had as much imagination as any kid, perhaps even more active than most. When she was much younger, she even had an imaginary friend that she would swear was real. I checked her bedroom just in case. No sign of any stray cat, not even a stuffed cat. Susanna had plenty of stuffed owls and dogs, even a whale and a raccoon, but no stuffed feline that could be confused for the real thing. Plus, if there had been a cat, my allergies would have already started acting up. That night, after dinner, Susanna was uncharacteristically quiet. Usually, she would be enthusiastically telling me or her brother about her day. She would even call her dad, my ex-husband Will, on Skype if she was particularly energetic. Her father and I were divorced, but he had remarried and moved an hour away. He was a great dad and would listen intently to his daughter as she recounted her day to him. Susanna looked lethargic, and I felt her forehead, making sure that she did not have a fever. Sweetie, are you feeling okay? I ran my fingers through her soft hair as she looked up at me. I'm just tired, Mommy. I think I need some coffee, she said, with a little grin, and I couldn't help but laugh. She smiled a little and went back to watching cartoons. Justin was playing on his PlayStation. With both kids occupied, I took the opportunity to get everything ready for bed. Cleaning up the kitchen was relatively easy. We had ordered pizza and used paper plates, so there were no dishes to wash. I never knew I would be so excited about not doing dishes. But that's adult life for you. When I tucked my kids in for that night, Justin went right to sleep, but my daughter took some coaxing. She asked if I could read her a bedtime story, something she hadn't asked for a few months. I indulged her, picking a story that would take no more than 10 minutes. I still had some things to do to prepare for work tomorrow before I could go to bed myself. Even though I loved reading to her, I couldn't take too long doing it. Can I hear one more story, Mommy? She asked me, with her eyes already closed. No, sweetie, you're really tired and you need to get some sleep. I kissed her on the cheek and tucked her in one last time. Mommy? She asked, her speech already slurring with exhaustion. What if that cat comes back tonight? Then you should tell him to go away, I teased before turning off the light and closing the door behind me. I finished up my prep work for tomorrow, did a little more cleaning, and then finally dragged myself to bed after a hasty shower. If I was lucky, I'd get a little over 6 hours of sleep tonight. Maybe I could sleep in when I retired. As I walked to bed, I very quietly checked on each of my kids. Justin was snoring softly, which was kinda cute, and Susanna was fast asleep with her arm wrapped around her favorite stuffed whale. The next day came too soon, and I groaned as I dragged myself to the kitchen. Everyone needed breakfast, and no amount of grumbling would help me get it done. Walking down the hallway, I knocked on each of my kids' doors. Time for breakfast, I called out, even managing to sound cheery. Justin emerged first, bleary-eyed, and headed to the bathroom. I busied myself with making coffee and pouring out the kids' cereal. My son entered the kitchen, already dressed but yawning. He sat down and started eating his cereal with his eyes half closed. Did you sleep well, sweetie? I asked him as I joined him at the table. I wish it was Saturday, he grumbled, still shoveling his cereal into his mouth. It's Saturday tomorrow, and you guys can sleep in, and I'll make pancakes, I promised him. Pancakes were the kids' favorite breakfast food. Where's Susanna? Justin asked, looking over to her usual spot at the table, which was empty. I mentally cursed myself and stood up to go check on my daughter. I was hoping she was already dressed, otherwise she might not have time to eat breakfast before rushing out to the bus stop. I knocked on her door and waited. I didn't want to open the door if she was in the middle of dressing. Susanna, honey, are you up? You're going to have to hurry if you want to eat breakfast before the bus comes. But I heard no answer from her. I opened the door and saw Susanna still under the covers, her tiny arm wrapped tight around her whale. Walking over, I gently touched her arm. Maybe she was sick? After all, she had seemed so lethargic last night. Susanna, sweetie, you really need to. My voice trailed off as I touched her forearm. My daughter's arm was ice cold, and it was at that moment that I realized she wasn't breathing. The rush of fear and adrenaline that hit me at that moment was like a punch to the face. I didn't even realize I was screaming until Justin ran into the room, eyes wide and panicked. He looked at Susanna and screamed too, his eyes going wider. I attempted CPR, but there was no hope. She was completely stiff, like she was frozen. Justin called an ambulance, and the EMT found me in my daughter's room, still trying to breathe life back into her little body. They had to pry me away from her. I don't remember much of what happened next. It was a blur, and and I think I may have fainted at one point. Calling Will and telling him what happened to our daughter was one of the hardest moments in my life, as was planning her funeral. I blamed myself. I should have done more to help my daughter. She hadn't been feeling well. Why didn't I take her to the emergency room? The autopsy had revealed her heart had failed to pump properly. Heart failure was rare at such an early age, but it was not unheard of. They tried to assure me that her death was painless and sudden enough that there would not have been any warning. I blamed myself. I think I would always blame myself. I had taken a leave of absence from work, and Justin was staying with his dad. Both of us didn't want to go back home. Not to the place where Susanna had died. While Justin could stay with his dad, I couldn't stay in hotels forever. My money would run out eventually. I had to go back to work. Even though they had been accommodating, their understanding wouldn't last forever. And someone had to do something with Susanna's room. I thought about leaving it as it was, a shrine to her almost. But that didn't seem healthy or wise. I knew my daughter well enough to know that she wouldn't have wanted that. When I walked into the house, I was struck by two things. It smelled terrible, and it was so utterly still. I almost walked back out and slept in the car because it felt so eerie. But I forced myself to stay. The garbage stank as I did the dishes that had been left out. The milk had curdled on the kitchen table, and I tossed it out with the shutter. Tomorrow was the start of the weekend, and I could still be free from work. So I stayed up until well past midnight cleaning and disinfecting my home. Even though it was a mundane and time-consuming task, it made me feel better. It was a tiny step toward normalcy. Before bed, I resolved to take a bath. I couldn't remember the last time I had one. With 2 kids, a full-time job, I rarely had the time to sit and soak in some bubbles. I walked past Susanna's room and bit back a sob. I couldn't even bring myself to look at her door. Tomorrow, I might have the strength to go inside. Maybe. The bubble bath did help relax me, and I felt exhaustion tug at me, and I knew sleep would not be far away. I toweled off and crawled into bed naked. There was no point in pajamas, as I was the only one in the house. Sleep claimed me quickly, and I welcomed the temporary oblivion. I awoke again sometime in the night, gasping for breath. I was sweating, and I felt an oppressiveness in the air. It was like the oxygen had become cold and heavy at the same time. I glanced at the alarm clock, and the neon red letters told me that it was just after 3 a.m. I lay there, feeling dread creep over me. I had no idea what had awakened me, until I saw something creeping up towards my face from the end of the bed. I had not noticed it at first. It was black and blended into the darkness of the bedroom. As it crept forward, I saw what it was. It was a cat. So black that it looked like an oil slick. The moonlight that crept in from the window only illuminated it slightly, but it was enough. Its eyes weren't visible until it stopped inches from my face. They were a shining onyx, glinting at me with a kind of amused malice. No pupils were visible, and I wondered briefly if it was actually blind. My mouth opened, but no sound emerged. I was too shocked to scream. Reaching out, I touched it gently, gingerly, hoping I was hallucinating the whole thing. The fur was as soft and slick as silk. The black cat opened its mouth wide, almost like it was mocking my own silent scream. Its gums, teeth, and tongue were just as black as the rest of it. all of it leading down its pitch black gullet. And then it spoke, a whispery voice echoing up from the depths of the cat's body, though the mouth did not move. Mary. Hey there guys, I hope you enjoyed this week's story. It's a little bit of a feels pasta for you this week. And if you guys would like a chance for your story to be narrated by me, please, if you'd like, send them to my email in the description down below. And I'll see you all next Monday with a brand new story.